King's Landing smelled like rotting fruit and secrets. Even before the Raven from Storm's End arrived, Eddard Stark knew his time in the south was running short. The king was dying. And in this place, where daggers hid behind words and loyalty, was bought by gold, dying kings meant dangerous games. But this time Eddard would not play the fool. He summoned Varys in the dead of night. The spider arrived like a shadow, slipping through cracks in the stone. "You've read the letter?" Ned asked quietly, holding a sealed parchment from Stannis Baratheon. Varys gave a slow nod. "Yes, my lord, and you're right to trust him." "I've been a fool before," Ned admitted, eyes heavy with guilt. "But no more. Cersei and her children are illegitimate. Stannis is the rightful heir. I will not stand by while the throne falls to treason." Varys raised a brow. "And the queen? She will be arrested. Quietly. I have made arrangements." "You did not tell Littlefinger," Varys cut in. And for the first time, Ned saw a flicker of something rare in the eunuch's eyes. Concern. "No," Ned said. "I see him for what he is now, a man who hides behind smiles and thrives on chaos." Varys exhaled, almost relieved. "Then perhaps we stand a chance." At sunrise, Cersei Lannister was seized in the Red Keep, her children taken into custody by the City Watch, loyal to Eddard's hand-picked commander. The moment Joffrey screamed in protest, the gold cloaks pointed their spears toward him. There was no blood, just silence and fear. Stannis Baratheon's Raven arrived that same day. He would march on King's Landing within the fortnight. The crown was his by law, and with the Queen exposed, even the nobles had no stomach to argue. Littlefinger was nowhere to be found. By the end of the week, the Red Keep had changed. Sansa and Arya, once kept hostage by a queen's manipulations, were escorted safely to Winterfell under the watch of trusted bannermen. Ned stayed in the capital to ensure the realm did not crumble during the transition. When Stannis finally arrived, he took the Iron Throne, silent, grim, and burning with the fire of justice, but Eddard Stark did not stay. He had never belonged in the south, and with honor intact and daughters safe, he rode north again. Winterfell hadn't changed, but the people had. Robb had grown harder in Ned's absence, protective of his siblings, questioning the world's fairness. Bran had lost the use of his legs, and with that, his innocence. But their father's return steadied everything. The Ravens brought news of Tywin Lannister's retreat to Casterly Rock. There would be no war, not with the Queen disgraced and her children exposed as bastards. Jaime Lannister remained a prisoner in Stannis's court, a sword in a cage, and Robb never had to raise a banner against the South. Instead, he trained, listened, learned from his father how to lead in times of quiet as well as chaos. The bannermen rallied around the Starks with pride, not desperation. The North felt strong again. No Karstark betrayal, no Bolton scheming. The flayed man still hung above Dreadfort's gates, but Roose Bolton kept his knives sheathed in the presence of a living. Warden Theon Greyjoy too remained in Winterfell, neither friend nor foe, but something in between. Ned treated him fairly, even kindly, and in Theon a seed of loyalty began to bloom, though it struggled against years of Greyjoy pride. But not all things could be solved with honor. Jon Snow wrote letters from the Wall. Strange things. Walkers, whites, a king beyond the Wall named Mance Rayder rallying wildlings. Ned read the words in silence, then folded the parchment slowly. "I believe him," he said. "What do we do?" Robb asked. "We ride," Ned said. "This time, before it's too late." And so, the Lord of Winterfell rode north. Not to war, but to watch. To stand beside the son he never claimed, because the real war, the one that would decide everything, had not yet begun. The Wall was no place for old ghosts, but they gathered there all the same, haunting the cold wind, whispering through the ice. When Eddard Stark arrived at Castle Black, he brought not just men, but something the Night's Watch hadn't seen in years. Respect. Lord Commander John Snow met him at the gates, older than his years and heavier in his stare. "I wasn't sure you'd come," John said, his voice quiet, uncertain. "You're my son," Ned replied, and for a brief second the wall of silence between them cracked. John swallowed. "A bastard." Ned looked out across the frozen expanse of the north. "That's a word I've allowed to linger far too long." They didn't speak of Rhaegar. Not yet. But something had changed. Maybe the truth hadn't reached John's ears. But he sensed something in his father's face, a heaviness that wasn't just the cold. Ned walked the wall that night. The sky stretched endlessly above, black and silent. He remembered Benjen, he remembered promises, and he listened carefully. When John spoke of the things he had seen, dead things that moved, a ranger's hand that still twitched after death, Sam Tarly's trembling account of the girl and the white ghost howling at things no man could see, Ned Stark believed. "I'm taking men beyond the wall," John said the next morning. "You'll not go alone," Ned replied. "The North will march with you." And march it did. 10 bannermen joined him, sworn to House Stark, hardened from snow and time. Sir Roderick led them on horseback, flanked by Karstark men, Mormont scouts, and a dozen Umbers. The wildlings didn't know what to make of the Starks at first. They were used to fire and iron, not offers of parley. But Ned, standing beside John, spoke of peace, not conquest, of a danger far greater than the squabbles of kings. And slowly the wall of distrust began to thaw. Even Mance Rayder paused to listen when Ned Stark offered terms. "You're the Warden of the North," Mance said, spitting into the snow. "But your kind has never treated us as anything more than animals." Ned met his eyes. "We're all men when the dead come, and they are coming." The alliance didn't come easily, but it came. Not through force, not through blood, but through mutual fear. The threat of something darker than wolves or dragons. Back in Winterfell, Robb held the North in his father's absence. Sansa read Raven scrolls with Lady Catelyn, learning names, debts, and banners. Arya trained with the sword behind the godswood, too wild for sewing and too quiet for comfort. And Theon, still torn between Greyjoy and Stark, stood watch at the walls each night, wondering if he belonged anywhere at all. They felt the cold. Growing, it seeped into the stones, the bones, the dreams. Bran woke screaming one night. Visions of the Night King burned into his mind. He saw a great shadow spreading across the north, white as frost and silent as death. He saw ravens with too many eyes, wolves burning in snow, and a heart tree bleeding from the mouth. Maester Luwin did what he could, but Bran's mind had already opened. The three-eyed raven was calling. South of the Neck, Daenerys Targaryen sailed for Westeros, not with broken ships and desperation, but with fire and blood. Her dragons grew monstrous over the narrow sea, and her army was unstoppable. The Unsullied, the Dothraki, the freed men of Essos. They followed a queen who had survived fire and betrayal, but Westeros was not in flames. Not yet. King Stannis ruled with harsh justice. King's Landing had no wildfire, no battle, no mad queen. Tyrion Lannister was never hunted, never accused of regicide. Instead, he served as a skeptical but brilliant voice in Stannis's court. And yet, they all felt it. Something ancient was stirring in the north. Something Daenerys could feel across the sea, and the dragons, restless under her command, began to scream at the sky. The sky. Jon stood beside his father in the frozen woods beyond the wall, the snow up to their knees, breath misting like smoke. The wildlings watched from the tree line, wary but quiet. They hadn't seen southern lords ride past the wall without fire and steel in generations. And here stood Eddard Stark, cloaked in furs, hand on the hilt of his sword, but not to draw it. They came upon the bodies just before dusk. 5 men of the Night's Watch, their eyes pale, skin waxy, limbs twisted. One of them twitched when touched, not from life but from something worse. Ned crouched beside one and pulled his glove off. The skin beneath was hard as ice. "Burn them," he said without hesitation. No one argued. The pyre's flames climbed high into the night. Men gathered around, silent. Some crossed themselves. Others looked away. John met his father's eyes. "Now do you believe?" Ned didn't answer right away. The fire reflected in his eyes like some omen he couldn't name. "I always did. I just hoped I wouldn't have to." The ravens flew fast from Castle Black. Letters were sent to every great house, not for war, but for unity. Eddard Stark wrote them himself, each one sealed with the dire wolf of Winterfell. "The dead are real. The long night is not a tale. Send men, send steel, or you will bury your children beneath the snow." Some answered. House Mormont sent every soul they had. House Reed answered from the neck. Even the Vale, quiet and withdrawn, pledged swords when they learned Eddard Stark had returned to the wall. But the South was slower, King Stannis believed. But with his own wars and his faith in Rella, he saw the coming threat through fire rather than frost. He sent Davos north with grain and gold, but not yet soldiers. Queen Daenerys, having landed on Dragonstone, received Ned's raven with curiosity, but also caution. She knew the Starks had once ruled the North alone. She did not trust easy alliances, especially when dragons were her only certainty. And so the North waited. Winterfell became a fortress. Robb walked the ramparts at dawn, inspecting the walls, the archers, the food stores. Every day brought more men to their gates. Not for war against men, but war against death. He no longer needed a crown. The people called him Lord Robb, or the Wolf Prince, and he answered to both without pride. Sansa worked tirelessly by candlelight, writing letters to lords, rationing food, organizing supplies. She remembered her time in King's Landing too well to sit idle. And Arya, she vanished for days at a time, hunting in the woods, always returning with meat and questions no one wanted to ask. Theon stayed, though he looked more Greyjoy by the day. He trained with the guards, he patrolled, he kept to himself. And though no one said it aloud, Robb was watching him. Bran, however, was no longer truly there. The dreams had consumed him. He spoke of the three-eyed raven now as if he were real. He whispered names of people long dead. He said the wall would fall, that the Night King was more than a monster, that he remembered things he never lived. Maester Luwin feared for the boy, but the direwolves did not. Summer stayed close to Bran. Now, watching the shadows, far in the north, Jon stood beneath the heart tree with Ned. "There's something else," Jon said. Ned turned to him. "I had dreams too. A tower. A woman. She whispered my name, but it wasn't snow." Ned went quiet. The wind in the trees stilled. The red leaves above them fluttered like blood in the breeze. "It's time you knew," Ned said. "You are not my son." Jon's eyes widened. "Your mother was my sister, Lyanna. She died in a tower, giving birth to you. Your father was Rhaegar Targaryen." The words hung heavy in the cold air. "No, that's not possible. I kept you safe, lied to everyone, even to you. If Robert had known who you were, you'd have died before your first breath." Jon staggered back, breath sharp. "Why now?" "Because you need to know who you are. Before this war begins, the Night King won't care whose son you are, but the realm might, and you will have to choose if you want to be Jon Snow or Aegon Targaryen." Far to the east, Daenerys stood on the cliffs of Dragonstone staring north. Her dragons circled above, restless and loud. Tyrion stood beside her, hands behind his back. "You've seen the raven," he said. "Yes, from a Stark. A living one for once." Tyrion muttered. She turned her head. "You knew Ned Stark, didn't you?" "I knew his honor. That's what got him killed, or nearly did." Daenerys didn't speak. She stared into the mist and wondered what sort of man would warn her of death without demanding fealty. Then she looked to her dragons and whispered, "We'll go north." Snow fell heavier now, thick and constant. burying the world inch by inch. The north had known winter before, but this was different, colder, hungrier, as if the very air carried whispers of death. Ravens flew slower, fires burned lower, and even the strongest men began to feel it in their bones. John stood on the wall, eyes fixed on the horizon. Below him, Castle Black teemed with activity. Wildlings worked side by side with black-cloaked brothers. Stark banners flew from the towers, and scouts were sent out hourly. The army of the living was gathering, but they were still too few. "They'll be here before the thaw," Eddard Stark said, joining him atop the wall. "If it ever comes." John didn't answer at first. He just watched the snow blow over. "The forest. Do you think they'll believe it? The south, I mean. Some will. Some won't. Doesn't matter now. We've done all we can. When they come, it won't be banners that matter. It'll be steel, fire, and who's willing to die on the right side of the wall." John's voice had changed, steadier, sharper. Eddard noticed it in the way he stood, the way men looked to him. He wasn't just the Lord Commander anymore. He was something more. "You'll lead them," Ned said, placing a hand on his shoulder. John shook his head. "I don't even know who I am anymore. You're the blood of the North and fire both. That makes you dangerous. To them. To you." Ned paused, then smiled sadly. "To the dead." At Winterfell, the last banners had arrived. House Tarly from the Reach, led by Samwell's father, begrudging and proud. House Glover, House Manderley, even a few ships from the Iron Islands, sent by Yara Greyjoy under uneasy truce. The realm had never been so close to unity. Robb greeted each lord personally. Sansa recorded their pledges. Arya, quiet now, always watching, walked the shadows of the keep like a ghost, but all eyes turned to the skies when the first roar came. The dragons arrived at dusk. They circled the castle like falling stars, flames licking the wind, wings massive and endless. People screamed, some ran, others knelt. When Daenerys Targaryen landed her dragon beyond the outer walls, Winterfell itself seemed to hold its breath. She dismounted with grace and fire in her eyes. Behind her came Tyrion, then Missandei, Grey Worm, and the Unsullied. Robb approached, first sword-sheathed expression unreadable. "I am Robb Stark," he said. "I know who you are," Daenerys replied. "You sent the raven." "No," Robb said. "My father did." She looked up to see Eddard Stark riding through the gates, cloaked in furs, eyes sharp with the weight of 1,000 truths. For the first time since crossing the sea, Daenerys looked unsure. "I saw you die," she said quietly. "No," Ned replied. "You saw the price of trusting the wrong man. That mistake won't be repeated." That night, they met beneath the godswood. Jon stood between them, fire and ice, blood of dragons and wolves. "You are Daenerys Stormborn of House Targaryen," Ned said. "Rightful heir to the Iron Throne by your line. I do not question your claim." "But you don't support it either," she answered. "I don't care who rules when this war ends," Ned replied. "I care that there's something left to rule." Tyrion stepped forward, ever the voice of reason. "If the dead win, there'll be no thrones, no crowns, just graves and snow." Jon looked between them. "We need each other. We don't have the luxury of fighting over titles." Daenerys turned to Jon, her voice softening. "And what of your title? Targaryen, son of Rhaegar. You have the better claim." Silence. Ned nodded slowly. "He knows. I told him." Jon looked at her, heart in his throat. "I don't want the throne. I never did." Daenerys held his gaze for a long moment, then turned back to the fire. "Good. Then maybe we can fight together." In the frozen north, beyond the wall, the storm was coming. White Walkers marched across snowfields untouched by sunlight. At their head rode the Night King, silent and patient, his pale eyes glowing like dying stars they had waited centuries for. The world to forget. Now they would remind it what death truly meant. Behind them, tens of thousands of corpses trudged forward. Men, women, children, wildlings and watchmen, animals and giants. All turned, all silent, and somewhere in the storm a horn blew, not from the wall, not from men, but from something older, something forgotten. The wall groaned. Cracks appeared, and with a single thunderous echo, the wall began to fall. The sound of the wall breaking was unlike anything Westeros had ever known. A deep, thunderous groan that rolled across the north like the voice of the old gods themselves, crying out in warning. Ice shattered, stone crumbled, towers snapped like rotted bone. From Castle Black to Eastwatch, men screamed as the frozen monolith came apart piece by piece, falling into itself with the weight of a dying age. And from the gaping wound in the wall, the dead spilled forth. They moved like a storm cloud, silent. At first, then with shrieks that tore through the air like knives on flesh. White Walkers led them, calm and cruel, their blades gleaming with blue light. Behind them whites by the thousands, clawing, crawling, charging. The long night had truly begun. At Winterfell, the first raven arrived as snow darkened the morning skies. Jon read the message aloud before the lords assembled. His voice did not tremble. The wall has fallen, Eastwatch is gone, the dead march south. A heavy silence fell. No one breathed. The great hall of Winterfell, full of the North's might, suddenly felt like a tomb. Eddard stood slowly. Then, "We hold them here. We light every torch, every fire, every blade. If this is to be our last night, let it be one they remember." Robb turned to him. "We can't fight them alone." "We won't," Jon said, rising to stand beside him. "We have dragons. We have fire." He looked at Daenerys. She gave a single nod. "I'll burn them from the skies," she said. "Let the dead learn fear again." Preparations began immediately. Every smith was set to forge obsidian weapons from crates sent up from Dragonstone. Samwell Tarly arrived with ancient books, scrolls of forgotten knowledge from the Citadel. Gendry, brought north by Jon's request, worked beside blacksmiths day and night, shaping dragonglass into blades and arrowheads. Even the direwolves grew restless. Ghost patrolled the perimeter, eyes glowing in the dark. Nymeria returned too, older, wilder, leading a pack of wolves from the woods. Arya found her at the edge of the Godswood, and though the beast didn't stay long, Arya whispered, "Thank you for coming," before she disappeared again into the snow. Sansa handled the stronghold, rationing food, assigning shelter. Every man, woman, and child had a place. Winterfell was no longer a castle, it was a bastion, a last hope. That night, beneath the stars, Jon found Daenerys alone near the dragons. Rhaegal and Drogon stirred behind her, smoke curling from their nostrils. She didn't turn as he approached. "You don't have to fight this battle," he said softly. "You could go south. The realm would follow you." "I didn't come to rule ashes," she whispered. "And now, I couldn't leave even if I wanted to." Jon stood beside her. "Because of me?" She turned, firelight flickering in her eyes. "Because of all of you. These people, they never had a choice. I do, and I choose to stand with them." Jon reached for her hand. She didn't pull away. "Whatever I am," he said, "Targaryen, Stark, Snow, I'll die with the North if I must, but not before we finish this." Her voice barely broke the wind. "Then we'll finish it together." Far off, Bran lay silent in his chamber, eyes rolled back, breath shallow. He travelled the world in his mind, over mountains, through forests, deep into the heart of the storm. He saw the Night King, saw the creatures around him. He saw something else too, something older than even the White Walkers. A frozen shape, buried deep in the north, beneath the ice, pulsing like a heart. It was no man, no beast. It was something made, and it was waking. Bran gasped awake, frost clinging to his lips. His voice came in a whisper. "They want more than to kill us. They want to erase us. Maester Luwin bent close. Who, Bran? Who wants to erase us? The Night King doesn't march for land or power. He marches for memory, for the past. He wants a world without men, without stories, without life. The fire crackled beside him, but even that warmth felt small now. At the edge of the north, near the ruins of Last Hearth, the living made their first stand. Jon rode at the front, with Ghost and Tormund. Gendry carried the black banner of the Brotherhood. Daenerys circled above on Drogon, with Rhaegal flying beside them. Fire lit the trees. Obsidian-tipped arrows were notched, but it was not enough. The dead came like thunder, in waves, in silence, in screams. Giants broken by death crashed through the lines. The cold sapped strength. The walkers cut down men as if they were paper. Drogon burned hundreds, but more came behind. Jon fought like a man possessed. He cut through the undead, calling to the living to rally. Tormund was pulled under but climbed out roaring. Gendry was wounded. Others were lost, and in the chaos, the Night King watched from a hill of ice, unmoving, waiting. And then he raised his hand. The corpses began to rise again. Jon screamed, fall back to Winterfell!" The retreat began, and the dead followed. The night burned as they fled. Flames lit the sky from the ashes of Last Hearth, but they were a false victory. For every corpse that turned to ash beneath dragonfire, 5 more clawed up from the snow. The dead didn't care for numbers. They didn't break. They didn't fear. They simply followed. Jon rode hard, his direwolf Ghost keeping pace beside him, bloodied but alive. Behind him, the remaining free folk and Night's Watch galloped south, dragging the wounded, leaving the dead. Tormund, one arm wrapped tight to stop the bleeding, refused to fall behind. "We'll run out of road before we run out of dead," he growled. Jon didn't argue. He knew. From above, Drogon roared. Daenerys circled wide, sweeping fire over the trees to slow the tide. Rhaegal followed, but not as fast. The younger dragon limped through the air, a wing torn by ice. They had pushed the dragons too far already. Daenerys shouted through the wind, eyes filled with dread. "We won't reach Winterfell at this pace. They'll catch us before sunrise." Jon shouted back, and they both knew it was true. At Winterfell, the horns blew before dawn. Robb was the first to the ramparts, his breath clouding in the cold as he watched the first survivors arrive, broken, bloody, riding horses that foamed. At the mouth, the gates opened, and the last of the northern vanguard streamed in, staggering with the weight of the coming storm. Tormund collapsed in the snow, laughing and bleeding all at once. "They're coming, Wolf Prince," he rasped. "And there's a sea of them." Robb helped him to his feet. "Then we drown them in fire." Inside the keep, Sansa rallied the maids and stewards, organizing every last inch of Winterfell for battle. Children were hidden in the crypts. The sick and weak moved to the great hall. Every inch of stone would be a wall. Arya sharpened her blade in the corner, calm and silent. The hound watched her, grunting. "You ready, little bird?" "I'm not the bird anymore," she said. "I'm the storm." Jon and Daenerys were the last to arrive. They rode through the gates as the sun broke, a pale, cold light that offered no warmth. Rhaegal collapsed just beyond the wall, groaning in pain. Daenerys dismounted in silence, running a hand along the dragon's side. Jon approached Ned, blood on his face and frost in his beard. "They're close. Hours." "How many?" Ned asked. Jon looked past him. "Too many." Robb, standing nearby, gripped his sword. "Then we die in the north, as we were born." "No," Daenerys said, standing beside them. "Not today. We don't die, not until he does." They all knew who she meant. The Night King. Bran sat by the fire, unmoving. His eyes were white, drifting far away. Jon entered quietly, looking at the boy who no longer seemed like a boy at all. "You've seen him?" Jon asked. Bran nodded slowly. "He's near. He'll come tonight." "Why?" "He wants me." Bran said, voice flat. The three-eyed raven is the last memory of what the world was. If he kills me, the world forgets. Jon looked down. Then we protect you. You can't, Bran said simply, but you can lure him. The room went quiet. How? Jon asked. We put me in the Godswood, unprotected. He'll come. He always does. That evening the battle lines were drawn. The Unsullied took the front gate. The Dothraki, eager but shaken, formed the flank. Northern archers lined the walls, every quiver filled with dragonglass. Catapults, fire pits, and oil barrels were prepared. Sam, with Gilly beside him, helped light the trenches. In the crypts, the innocents waited and prayed. In the Godswood beneath the weirwood tree, Bran sat quietly in his chair. Theon Greyjoy stood beside him, dragging his sword behind him, armor too heavy for comfort. I'll protect him, he said to Jon, his voice raw. Jon looked at him long and hard. You betrayed us once. I did. Then earn your place. Theon nodded. I will. Night fell fast. Faster than it should have. The air grew colder, the wind slower. Even the fires seemed dimmer. Snow began to fall, but not soft. It came like ash, heavy, burning, wrong, and from the trees beyond Winterfell's walls they came. At first, shadows, then shapes, then death. The White Walkers stood like statues at the tree line, unmoving, waiting, and then the Night King emerged, riding. An undead Viserion, wings spread like wings of ice, eyes blazing. Jon stared up from the battlements. They're here. The horn blew once, twice, 3 times, and Winterfell prepared to meet the end. The scream of Viserion split the sky. Undead wings beat against the falling snow as the Night King soared above Winterfell, casting a shadow that devoured the light. His dragon no longer breathed fire, only frost, a white-blue blaze that froze stone and shattered men where they stood. And then the dead charged. The first wave hit like a flood, limbs thrashing, jaws snapping, eyes blank and endless. The Dothraki rode out to meet them, their blades flaming at the tips. For a brief moment it looked like they might hold, but then their flames vanished, one by one. From the ramparts, Sansa watched in horror as the Dothraki disappeared into the snow. Only a few returned, bloodied and wild-eyed. Their horses screamed louder than the men. The dead had come to consume. At the gates, Grey Worm led the Unsullied in tight formation, shields locked. The moment the dead slammed into them, it was chaos. Screams, blood. Blades of dragonglass cut through whites, but for everyone that fell, 2 more climbed over it. Daenerys and Jon circled from above, Drogon and Rhaegal unleashing fire into the ranks of the dead. Entire swathes of them turned to ash, but the Night King did not move. He sat still on Viserion, watching, waiting. He had no need to fight yet. He had already won battles with silence. In the Godswood, Theon stood ready, a handful of archers behind him. Bran was still, eyes white, lost in time. Theon looked up at the branches of the weirwood and whispered, "If I fall here, let it mean something." The cold crept in slowly, and with it came the White Walkers. Arya danced through shadows. She moved like a whisper between the corridors of Winterfell, blade in hand. The training in Braavos now lived in every breath she took. Her eyes were sharp, focused. She struck fast, never staying in one place. She saw death coming around corners before it arrived, but even she was afraid, not of dying, but of failing. She passed Sam, covered in blood, swinging wildly at a wight 3 times his size. Arya threw a dagger into its neck and kept running. She didn't say a word. On the battlefield, Robb Stark fought with fury. His blade, dark with dragonglass, slashed through the undead with brutal precision. Behind him, Mormont men followed. Lyanna Mormont, tiny and fearless, drove her spear into a giant's throat before the creature collapsed on top of her. Robb screamed her name, but it was too late. They were losing ground. Sansa looked to her. brother from the tower, and knew this was not a war they could win, not unless someone changed the board. Inside the sky, Jon saw the Night King finally move. Viserion swooped low, frost blasting the trenches, freezing the fire that kept the dead at bay. The Night King dismounted inside the castle grounds. Jon urged Rhaegal into a dive, roaring downward. He leapt mid-flight and rolled into the courtyard, sword in hand, breath burning in his throat. The Night King stood waiting. No words, no expression, just ice. They charged each other. Steel clashed. Jon struck hard, but Longclaw barely slowed the creature. The Night King moved like a shadow, fast, heavy, relentless. Jon was thrown backward, hitting the ground hard. He scrambled up, but the Night King raised his arms, and the dead began to rise again. Every corpse in the courtyard, every man Jon had fought beside, including Eddard Stark. Jon froze. His father stood among the risen, eyes pale, face calm. "No," Jon whispered, stumbling back, but the Night King only stared, turning away, leaving Jon trapped with the risen dead, helpless to follow. He moved toward the godswood. Theon fought like a man already dead. His arrows were gone, his blade shattered. The other men who stood with him had fallen. Whites poured into the godswood now, and Theon fought with a spear, panting, bloodied, bones aching. But he didn't move from Bran's side. Bran's eyes blinked suddenly, his voice quiet. "He's here." The trees whispered, the snow paused, and the Night King stepped between the trunks. Theon looked at Bran one last time. "I'm sorry," he said. "You're a good man, Theon." And with a scream, Theon charged. The Night King stabbed him through the gut, clean and cruel. The spear clattered to the ground. Bran was alone, until the wind moved, until the shadows twisted, and from the dark, Arya Stark leapt, silent, swift. The dagger in her hand gleamed, the one of Valyrian steel Bran had given her. The Night King turned, caught her by the throat, but she dropped the dagger to her other hand and drove it through his heart. For a moment, nothing moved. Then the Night King shattered into 1,000 shards of ice, and across the battlefield, every white fell. Dawn came quietly. Smoke rose from the ruins. The snow no longer fell, and for the first time in a generation, the north was silent.